Hello, everyone. This is the Catholic Esquire. So, unless you've been living under a rock, you should know by now that the conclave has concluded. Robert Prevost has been elected. He has chosen the name Pope Leo XIV as his papal name. And already, traditionalists are trying to find ways to find some good in what happened. And God bless them, because we should always look for the good in things. But my friends, one of the things I can add, I think, to the discussion, because I know many people are talking about this conclave and the outcome, is the fact that I ran in political circles to some of the highest levels, actually, on the state level. I know how politicians work. I know how politics works behind the scenes. I know how they cut deals. And then I know how they portray things to the public. I know how the sausage is made, so to speak. Having looked at the outcome of this and going back after the fact and looking at some articles out there, it's very apparent to me that rather than falling for the trap, which I'm going to explain here in a minute, we need to be extra vigilant. We need to be extra aware. We need to be wise like serpents. We cannot fall for the trap that the modernists have just set, because what happened, my friends, here was essentially a coup. It was not just the St. Gallen Mafia. We're talking now the St. Chicago Mafia, as I call it. The modernists got their guy in, and now they're misleading traditionalists into thinking that somehow they have some hope as far as restoring tradition to the church. And it's causing, I believe, traditionalists, very smart ones, to let their guard down. And so the purpose of this video today is to explain that to you, to show that what we really have here is a Francis 2.0, no question about it. But that in many ways, this version of Francis, this 2.0 Francis, is going to be much more dangerous in many ways. As far as I know, other than Tim Gordon, who did a nice job on the Avoiding Babylon podcast, he explained all of this. Tim Gordon gets it. I haven't seen anybody else get it, quite frankly. You're not going to see the Michael Matts get it. Eric Sammons, no. These guys are falling for it. So I hope you listen to what I have to say today, and also check out Tim Gordon's interview on Avoiding Babylon. He did a really nice job of laying that out in much more detail. In this video, I'll try to be concise and succinct and show you that what we're experiencing here is a 2.0 of Francis. We'll begin with Leo's speech, the text of his speech first, and then I'll wrap it up at the end and try to put all the pieces together for you. All right, looking now at the text of the speech from Vatican News website, I thought about just reading the whole thing to you, but so much of this is filled with platitudes and fluff, very Bergoglian. So I decided not to do that, just simply to save time. But what I did do is go ahead and highlight some key phrases for you. Greetings to Rome and to the world from Pope Leo XIV. He uses the language of Bergoglio, and what he's doing here is he's giving you not so subtle code words. Obviously, anybody who's followed Francis in the last 12, 13 years recognizes these words. The secular media may or may not. It sounds all very nice on the surface, which typically this type of modernist squish platitudinous language does. But you'll see here God who loves us all unconditionally. You'll see help us one and all to build bridges through dialogue and encounter, joining together as one people, always in peace. This reference to building bridges and dialogue is going to be repeated. And building bridges is an interesting metaphor. That's the metaphor that Father James Martin used in his book. Isn't that interesting? Dialogue, of course, is a Vatican II word. All the popes since Vatican II have used it. Francis used it quite a bit. Encounter, that's another word you'll frequently hear in the modernist lexicon. What he's doing here, my friends, is he's telling you, this is who I am. I am one of you modernists, and we're going to continue the agenda, as we're going to see. He does thank Pope Francis for this. He mentions Francis a couple times here. So he wants to make sure that you don't think he's distancing himself from Francis, despite perhaps some of the things he's going to do on the surface. Scrolling down, again, we see this word. In a sense, all of us can journey together towards the homeland that God has prepared for us. So again, all of us together, we're going to journey, very typical modernist language. You're going to see references to missionary church, a church that, again, here we go, builds bridges and encounters dialogue, a church ever open to welcoming. So again, we see this. We're not going to worry about doctrine, and we're not going to say things that's going to be problematic for some people who are outside the church. We're going to go out and be missionaries to them, but we're going to do it in a way of building bridges, using dialogue, and welcoming people. And it goes on to say, like this square with its open arms, all of us who are in need of our charity, our presence, our readiness to dialogue, and our love. So again, we just keep repeating the same words over and over again, and he's trying to get the point across. He's saying, hey, Mr. Modernist out there, I'm on your team, okay? Scrolling down a little more, to all you brothers and sisters in Rome and Italy throughout the world, we want to be a synodal church, a church that moves forward. Very important keywords here. So he uses the word as synodality. He includes that in the speech. He's saying that effort is going to continue forward. And as I'm going to make the case in this video, that is the agenda. That's very, very important. And he puts it right into his opening speech here. And then, of course, he uses the phrase, a church that moves forward. Francis would frequently use to that. Remember, he doesn't want anybody that's stuck in the past, who's backwards, right? So the opposite of forwards is backwards. That's the bad thing, is backwards, but we want to be forward. So we're using the language of progress. Now, he does conclude the speech with a prayer to Our Lady of Pompeii even. I have a devotion to Our Lady of Pompeii. So he concludes it in a very traditional way. And of course, he's wearing all the traditional garb. And that's all by design, my friends. But I just wanted to point out that this speech sets the agenda, and it's an agenda for Francis 2.0. Okay, so what's going on here, my friends? As I just showed you in that opening speech, Leo is through and through a Bergoglian. He's going to advance the Francis agenda. He made that very clear. He used all the keywords. The true Bergoglians, those in Rome, those who believe in that modernist Vatican II agenda, recognize all the key words. Most of the secular world isn't going to pick up on those things. I mean, they may say, well, boy, that sounds like Pope Francis, and he thanked Pope Francis a lot in there, but no, he's very much setting the agenda. Now, here's where the 2.0 comes in. It's not going to be a replica of Francis. There's a change of strategy here, my friends. The problem with Francis is that he did not understand Americans. He didn't understand the traditional movement at all. And I do believe and agree, and this is something Tim Gordon had mentioned on Avoiding Babylon, I think Francis was very much caught off guard by the resistance he received from the traditional movement. I think Traditionis Custonis was a reaction to that, an angry, imprudent, stupid reaction, but a reaction nonetheless, because he didn't expect it. It was throwing him off of his game, and it was causing and throwing a wrench into the works. I do believe that, which is why we need to keep talking like this and being very truthful, open, and bold. But nonetheless, it was a problem. And so what the modernists realize is that Francis, being from South America, he was a Peronist, he was a bully and a thug. Americans naturally tend to rebel against that. And I don't think Francis quite understood that. You know, he's very used to people going along with things. He's not used to this rebellious nature that all Americans have, even some of the most traditional Catholics. It's just in our blood. It's part of America. And so what they realized is, like, we need to find someone who doesn't have baggage that people can cling on to, especially theological baggage. That's very important. We need someone that doesn't have theological baggage. We need someone who understands America better. We need someone who will listen to what the more powerful elements of the church, the guys behind the scenes, want him to do. I think part of the problem with Francis is he just didn't listen to anybody and did whatever he wanted. They want someone who can be controlled. So they wanted someone who could be controlled, who understood America a little bit better and could communicate better, and who had no theological baggage. At that point, the plan went into works to get this man elected. It was not obvious to me before the conclave. It's now obvious to me after the conclave, especially after I went back and looked at some of the news articles. Basically, what happened is they pulled off a coup. This was the man who the hardcore leftist, liberal, modernist, whatever you want to call him, wanted. They pushed it through. And I believe, and I don't have direct evidence of this, but based on my experience on how politics works, I think they cut a deal. I think they cut a deal with conservative cardinals. I'm not going to say any specific names, but because I don't know for sure. But what I believe happened is they cut some sort of deal. They were probably a little short of the 2/3 that they needed. They needed to pull a few more over on board to get a guy that they wanted in. I call it, instead of the St. Gallen Mafia, this is more like the St. Chicago Mafia, because that's what we're talking about here. A guy from Chicago who's going to be controlled by Cardinal Cupich and those who think along his lines. And they got their guy in. I think they cut a deal with the conservatives, and now they have their guy. And the trickery here, and this is where this is going to happen going forward, is I think the deal was that they're going to give the conservatives some concessions the hardcore modernists actually don't care about. I've said this before and I'll say it again. They don't care about the Mass. They don't care if you go to traditional Latin Mass. They don't care if the traditionalist ladies show up in their veils and pray the rosary every day. They don't care about any of that. They're going to give it to us. Whether that's a full repeal of Traditionis Custodis or just a lack of enforcement, they're going to give us that. You saw with the traditional garb that Leo wore, that was supposed to be a sign of comfort to traditionalists. That was done on purpose. The name Leo XIV, it's a perfect unity name because it gives the hardcore modernists something to refer to, because they think Leo XIII was a super justice warrior, so they can claim that. At the same time, the traditionalists can claim that he's also on their side, because Leo XIII was generally seen as a traditional conservative pope. And so it is, in a sense, a unity candidate, but it's someone who's being pushed by the hardcore modernists in order to take over the church. How is the takeover of the church going to happen? It's going to happen through synodality. He just told you that. That was in the speech we just read. It's going to be done through synodality. It's going to be done through the individual bishops on a decentralized basis. It's not going to come directly from Rome. You're not going to see major encyclicals, I don't expect. You're not going to see major commands coming down from Rome on all of that. Synodality, my friends, you have to remember, by its nature, is decentralized. That's the whole point. Synodality seeks to deconstruct the Catholic Church, basically deconstruct the papacy, deconstruct the hierarchy, spread authority out to others, not just bishops, but ultimately to women, lay people, that sort of thing. And that's where the changes are going to happen. I believe the changes are going to happen on more of a local level. You'll start to see requests for indults or exceptions to rules, whether they be married priests, whether they be women controlling certain church government functions. Whatever the case is, you're going to start to see requests for indults. They're all going to be granted. In order to pacify the traditionalists, requests for traditional Latin Mass will also be granted. And what happens is that neutralizes the traditional movement, because they're going to give you the Latin Mass. They're going to give you a few of the bells and whistles. They're going to make it look like it's tradition and that he's friendly to them. Meanwhile, the church is being deconstructed right in front of our faces. That's the plan, my friends. That's what's going on. That's the new strategy that they're going to employ. It sounds very cynical. It sounds very bad. But the reason I'm talking about this is just so you're aware of it, so you can keep your eyes open. Unfortunately, many in mainstream traditional Catholic media have already fell for this. They've bought into this. They're already saying how wonderful it is that he seems to speak Latin and like Latin, and he might give us the Mass back. And he uses Leo. Wow, isn't it amazing? What a good sign. It's like, for someone who does have is cynical with political sensibilities, it's obvious what's happening here. This is a political coup, and it's being implemented to neutralize the opposition, and so far it's working. So, my friends, thank you for listening. Again, just be watchful, continue to pray, continue to fast. I do think that the good sign out of all of this is that our efforts in the past, traditionalist movements, those who are going on making big noise, a lot of noise, has really shaken the system, shaken those who've infiltrated the church, and it has had some impact to the point where they needed to change strategy. And so now we're going to have to adapt as well. More to talk about as far as that goes in future videos. Thank you for listening. Continue to pray for Holy Mother Church. Yes, continue to pray for restoration of the traditional Latin Mass, but continue to pray for protection of the Church herself, her hierarchy, her traditions, and her doctrine, because that's ultimately what it all comes back down to, is the truth in our Lord Jesus Christ, the Logos. That's where salvation is. Thank you for listening. God bless.